There is a neighborhood in Toronto known as The Village. It's down at Church and Wellesley where there is a concentration of LGBTQ plus bars and businesses and where the annual Pride Parade comes through, one of the largest and longest in the world. It's always been a vulnerable place from the years when police would raid bathhouses to harassment to Thomas Donald Bruce McArthur, or just Bruce McArthur as he's known in the media. He's Canada's oldest serial killer. He's Toronto's most prolific. And he's targeted Toronto's gay men for his sickening desire to abuse and murder. McArthur was a gay man in days and places when that was unacceptable. So at 23, just after same-sex relations were decriminalized, he married Janice Campbell and began working for Eaton's department store. They had 2 kids together, and while they were still young, McArthur began having sexual affairs with men. He would come out to his wife, and they continued their marriage until they separated in 1997. He began to frequent the bars in and around the village after his separation and pursued a relationship with a man. That relationship lasted about 4 years before they broke up. It was around this time that McArthur became a landscaper. It was also around this time, near his 50th birthday, that he would first, as far as we know, assault a man, Mark Henderson, an actor and model, on Halloween 2001. After coming up to see the man's Halloween costume, McArthur hit Mark several times with an iron pipe. Mark fought but lost consciousness. After waking up, he called 911 and was taken to a hospital with serious but not life-threatening injuries to his head and his fingers. McArthur turned himself in for this one and claimed he had no memory of what he did or why he did it. He would plead guilty and get a conditional sentence. He spent that first year under house arrest and followed that with 3 years of probation. He was barred from the village with few exceptions, and he could not spend any time with male sex workers. Most importantly, for later cases, he had to give up a sample of his DNA. He quickly obtained a record suspension, though, and so no criminal record that could be found during investigations existed. While he waited to be sentenced for that case, he set up a recon profile, a dating site for gay men who were into BDSM. He was also on at least 9 other dating sites, including Growler and Grindr. He had developed a reputation for being rough, and men were often counseled to avoid him, which made McArthur explosively angry. In November 2012, the Toronto Police Service launched Project Houston Task Force to look into the disappearance of Skandaraj or Skanda Navaratnam. They believe he met foul play but had no leads in the case. By the following summer, the project identified 2 other missing men, Abdul Basir or Basir Faizi and Majid Hamid Kahan. An anonymous tip led them to interview McArthur, but they could find no evidence that he had done anything foul to the men, not even to keep him in a list of suspects, and those 3 cases stagnated. Then Andrew Kinsman disappeared in June 2017, and another man, Salim Essen, disappeared. Another task force was formed, Project Prism, to investigate these disappearances and any connection to the Project Houston cases. Fears of a serial killer began to take hold when the bodies of Tess Ritchie was found on November 29th and Alora Wells was identified on November 30th. She was found in a ravine in Rosedale in August. It was Kinsman's disappearance that would give police their first solid lead, a red van with white chrome details and the name Bruce found on his calendar. It was a 2004 Dodge Caravan, and only one was registered to a man named Bruce McArthur to be precise. But by then McArthur had moved and the address on the registration was no good. It took a number of warrants, lots of footwork, and lots of surveillance to track the man now suspected in the disappearances of 5 men down. He had taken the van to an auto parts business 70 kilometers away from Toronto, but police found it, and they found evidence in it. Though they found his clients, or rather their properties where he did landscaping, and there they would find more evidence. Then they found his storage locker, and there they set up surveillance. They found his apartment, more surveillance there. Then they found direct evidence on McArthur's computer. Photographs of 2 of the victims on the day they disappeared. He was ordered arrested by surveillance if he was seen alone with anyone. On January 18th, 2018, police saw a young man enter McArthur's apartment and intervened, likely saving the life of the man who the court referred to as John. They did not have the bodies yet, but they had enough to arrest McArthur, and they were closing in. A number of properties were thoroughly searched. In the end, McArthur would plead guilty to and be convicted of the deaths of 8 men, who he buried in planter boxes primarily. They were Basir Faizi, 42, an immigrant from Afghanistan; Hamid Kayhan, 58, also an immigrant from Afghanistan; Skanda Navaratnam, a refugee from Sri Lanka who worked for McArthur at one time; Sarush Mahmoodi, 50, a refugee from Iran; Andrew Kinsman, 49, who also worked for McArthur at one time; Salim Essen, 44, a citizen of Turkey; Dean Lisowick, 43 or 44, a homeless man who frequented the Scott Mission; and Kirushna Humar Kanagaratnam, 37, an asylum seeker from Sri Lanka. McArthur sought out vulnerable men and took hundreds of post-mortem pictures of them after he killed them. Finding him was made more difficult by the use of apps to meet his victims and the time it would take to get information by warrant from the companies who owned those apps. There may well also have been some prejudices and biases that slowed down the investigation. McArthur was given life with no parole for 25 years after a guilty plea. He's first eligible for parole at 91, but it's doubtful he'll live long enough to apply. Lost in the story of the police investigation and legitimate concerns from the community on how that was handled, lost in the pictures of McArthur smiling in pictures taken from Facebook and his dating profiles, are the stories of the 8 men who intended to meet up with him and never came home again, who were discarded in planters and who, for so long, became defined by what happened to them. There is no doubt that the investigation was flawed and that record-keeping lost Toronto police important leads. One of the things that has come out of the McArthur investigation and reviews is that Toronto now has a dedicated missing persons unit. They now need to work on and continue to work on their relationship with the community and on the propensity to rely on stereotypes when assessing evidence, tips, and risk. And indeed, were it not for the village, for the pressure they put on police, McArthur may have taken more lives, may have never been found, and so in the end, they are the heroes of this story. The issues here could fill volumes, and instead, for today, we want to shine some light on the men who are no longer here to speak for themselves. Basir Faizi was a quick wit and was very smart. He loved his children. He led a double life, likely hiding his sexuality because of the way homosexuality is seen in his home country of Afghanistan. Like Skanda, he had this full-face smile and warm eyes. The crow's feet around them gave away a life that saw a lot of laughter. Sadly, his wife believed he had abandoned his family and did not want to be found. After finding out what happened to her husband, She has suffered emotionally and physically, and his two daughters miss their dad, taking a photo of him with them when they turn in at night. They talk of times when their father would sit with them to play and make strong memories with them. He had been working overtime to make sure that their Christmas lists were filled. Hamid Kahan came from a large family and had 2 children of his own and 3 grandchildren. We do not know a lot about him, but we know that he was the youngest of his siblings and that his children and grandchildren miss his presence in their lives. Skanda Navaratnam was 40 when he was taken, a man whose smile reached his eyes. He was known as a charming and charismatic man who was very kind. His brother, Navasilan, describes him as a jovial character and the live wire of the family. He loved to laugh. He supported his family and wanted them to have a better life. His friend Kevin Nash said that once, when his son was missing briefly, Skanda hopped on his bike and scoured the parks nearby to look for him. He was always there to help friends, said another friend, Jean-Guy Cloutier, of him. He loved animals and wanted to protect the forests and jungles of Sri Lanka, his home country. He was also almost impossible to beat at a Scrabble game, which he enjoyed playing with his friends. His remains were taken by his family to India. Sarush Mahmoodi liked to joke. He liked camping and soccer, and for about 10 years he worked in an automotive part factory in Barrie. He came to Canada as a refugee and met his wife here. Friends would say that everyone who met Sarush liked him, likely because he was a very easygoing man. Andrew Kinsman came across as gruff at times, but under that exterior was an intelligent man who cared deeply for the welfare of other people. He loved to hike, camp, and bake. He was dedicated to his community, providing supports wherever he could. He wanted to make the world better, and he accomplished that in his little corner anyway, whether or not he ever knew it. Salim Ehsan was a kind man who worked to support his family, but was unhappy as a gay man in Turkey. He moved to Australia for a while before moving to Canada in 2013. He was a friendly man who enjoyed learning new things, meeting new people, and exploring. He was becoming a peer worker when he was taken, a man who truly cared for others and wanted to help support them. His family wanted nothing more than for him to be happy and for people in the LGBTQ+ family to live without fear. They are devastated by the loss of the loving, curious, service-oriented son and brother. Dean Lisowick liked to paint. He was close to his parents until he began having mental health issues that led to a life on the streets. Still, he would sometimes send his mother cards that showed her how much he loved her. She would pass not knowing what had happened to him. Community members described him as a sweet guy who stuck up for others. He was street smart and defended others whenever they needed. He helped with food programs for the homeless and wanted to get his life together so that he could buy his daughter an e-bike. Karushna had been seeking asylum in Canada, fleeing a civil war in Sri Lanka, a conflict that saw his youngest brother killed. Unfortunately, his application had been denied and he was hiding from deportation, which made him very vulnerable. He wanted a bright future here and worked hard to save some money to send home to his family. He had 5 siblings and they describe him as the responsible one. He spoke to his mother on the phone every day until he was taken. 2 others are also lost in this story, Alora Wells and Tess Ritchie. And what of them? Well, the case into the discovery of Alora Wells is still open, and I encourage anyone who has any information at all to come forward to the Toronto Police Service. And Tess Ritchie's killer, was caught and put on trial and found guilty in March of 2020. Thank you for listening. Until next Saturday, have a great week. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.